Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a 2019 Respawn Entertainment action-adventure. This was an attempt to basically revive Star Wars in a video game world, since the franchise has essentially disappeared after a rather disastrous Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 in 2010. The only releases we got since then were pretty good multiplayer games, such as Star Wars The Old Republic and Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2. But among the single-player titles, there was nothing. In this game, we play as Cal Kestis, a Jedi Padawan that is left totally alone after Order 66 and a subsequent Jedi Purge. After some unfortunate events, he found new allies and decided to try and rebuild a new Jedi Order with their help. Gameplay-wise, it is a third-person action-adventure title, mainly revolving around melee combat. Your character does not have a lot of HP, but takes plenty of damage. Thus, the gameplay is centered around timings, evading, and parrying. It is noticeable that Jedi Fallen Order takes heavy inspiration from the Souls games, and is basically a Souls-like at its core. There are some direct correlations seen here, and it is not a bad thing, as taking other people's ideas and being inspired by them is the basis of creating. But there is a big difference between being inspired and outright stealing ideas. Also, there are two totally opposite sides to taking someone's ideas like this. It can greatly enhance your game if you make great use of those foreign concepts, or it can make your creation just an unoriginal copy of another thing. In this video, I want to see exactly where does the Fallen Order land between these two sides. So let's start by looking at the good qualities. The main thing that this game has to offer is of course the combat. It can be surprising, but Dark Souls inspired combat turned out to be a great fit for a lightsaber.
Can they? Get him! Oh no! Oh no no no! I hope this hits.
When you look at Jedi, they feel strong, agile and masterful, but not all powerful. And it is exactly what this game is about. When everything is done right, the combat looks and feels marvelous. You can parry and immediately follow up with an attack, or evade an enemy and strike from behind to make a lethal blow. But when you sleep and take a hit, it really matters, as some enemies can easily kill you in a couple of blasts. The game requires your attention and fast reactions, so the combat is complex and can provide you with a decent challenge. But it is not sadistic. And thanks to the difficulty setting, anyone can enjoy it. What elevates combat even more is that it goes hand in hand with the story, as everything starts with Cal as demoralized Padawan with basically no combat experience. So at the start, when you don't know everything too well and take a lot of damage, it perfectly fits the narrative. Later, when Cal establishes a better connection with the Force and gets more experience, you also play much better and feel a lot more confident. All in all, this is probably the best lightsaber combat in history of Star Wars gaming. It is impactful, fast, meaningful, and some enemies even can be dismembered? The story is another great part of this installment. It is not an Oscar-worthy script, but it is a proper story, with interesting world building, characters and a ton of fan service. The main character is great, and it is quite enjoyable to follow along on his journey with an adorable BD-2 droid.
Okay.
I really liked the acting from the main cast and enjoyed how motion capture looked on the screen. It is wonderfully done, and some cutscenes look very much movie-like. Next are exploration and platforming. They both work really well as segments to break up the constant fighting. There isn't much to say about platforming sections. You need to jump between walls, ropes and platforms. and constantly use your force powers to proceed through the levels. It looks cool and is fun, but nothing exceptional. The exploration bit is much more exciting. It is really a cool idea to have different hidden places and secrets around your levels for players to find. In this game, by exploring, we either unlock more customization options or get some EXP and listen to bits of world building.
Whoever owned this bag brought it from Coruscant. They were frustrated with the Jedi Council.
Rarely, you can also find secrets that increase your health, force meters, or even give additional healing steams. But this game's exploration also has some problems that can be really annoying, so let's look at them next. In this section, I will be looking at some issues that I have with this title. Leading from my previous point, let's start with exploration. So the outright concern here is that it is trying to mimic Souls games and introduces these Metroidvania style maps. This means that instead of having levels of some sort, you have a few semi-open world maps that you can explore. Usually, at a given moment, you only have a single main path open for you that you expected to follow, while everything else would be locked as you don't have required powers yet. Later you unlock needed powers and return to set points to open a new path to follow. Sounds good on paper, but the first problem is that this requires a lot of backtracking. The game does not have any sort of fast travel option. Instead, you can open shortcuts that will help you to traverse the map faster. This does help, but in no way this eliminates the problem. From time to time, you would be forced to backtrack through half of the map to reach a certain point that you could not reach earlier when you passed through it. What makes this problem even worse is the fact that you constantly find things that you can't interact with at the moment. Right in front of you there can be a chest that you just can't reach, or a locked door that you can't open. Things like this are just frustrating, because instead of interacting with it right now while you are standing in front of it, you will need to backtrack to it a few hours later, after you unlock the required power. Or instead, you can just forget about it, because of how annoying it would be to run all this way. As a result, you choose to either waste time or skip content. Not a great dilemma for a player. Let's look at an example. In the section of the game that unlocks a force push ability, there is a secret on a map. It needs a force push, but when you pass this place for the first time, you don't have this power yet, and we won't return here naturally. So the game expects that in a few minutes after unlocking said power, you will go through this whole section of the map for the second time, just to get a cosmetic item. Examples like this are everywhere. So if you are a completionist of some sort, you will be backtracking to places like this all the time, especially as the game literally marks them on a map, asking for you to return. It is definitely not an end of the world problem, but it sure could have been done better.
This was deliberately destroyed. I can still feel the hate of the act.
To add to this Souls-like Metroidvania feature, the game tries to be non-linear. What I mean by that is that there are a total of 5 planets that you will visit, and it is established that it is totally up to you when to visit any of them. At almost any moment you can choose a planet and just travel there. But all this is kind of just for show. Especially this can be seen at one of the first choices. We are given a choice between 2 planets, Zepho and Dathomir, but we have an objective to go to the Zepho and nothing to do on Dathomir yet. Besides, they are just not equal in their difficulty. Take a look at the first enemy on Zepho. Just a couple of small creatures. And now here is the first enemy on Dathomir, a giant death monster, basically a mini-boss. This planet is just a lot more brutal and overall much harder. If you follow the story, this will be the 4th planet out of 5 that you're going to visit. What is even worse, there is almost no benefit to going here any earlier, as when you reach a certain point on the planet, you will be greeted by a dead end, with no way to progress yet.
You don't seem ready. Dathomir is unforgiving. Return only when you're ready to face its perils in full.
Resulting in you leaving and returning later when the story demands it. The only thing that you will get by going here earlier, besides suffering, is a double-bladed lightsaber, which is really cool, but in my mind is not worth it. It is just much better to unlock it by naturally progressing through the plot, instead of doing it in the wrong order, because it is the wrong order. If you just follow the story, you will get to this planet when you are much stronger and a lot more fit to handle the danger presented. The only reason I can imagine why exploration is done in this Metroidvania non-linear style is just to mimic Dark Souls, as it is one of the main points of those games, that there is no predetermined path and instead you can explore wherever you want. The main difference though is that in Souls games you have an RPG system, so when you go into a difficult location with harder enemies, you will be rewarded with a lot of experience and much better equipment that will make you stronger. Jedi Fallen Order does not have this system or anything alike. As I have already said, the only thing that you can unlock by doing this is a double-bladed lightsaber, which is not even an upgrade to your weapon, but rather an alternative mode. It deals a lot less damage, but has much wider attacks in return. It is an alternative that is good for big fights with a lot of enemies at once, but is really bad for fights with stronger enemies and bosses. So unlocking it earlier does not directly make you any stronger, it just makes some fights a little easier. Another issue with the game design that I have is the whole hardcore type of gameplay. It manifests itself in more copying of Dark Souls. This can be seen in 3 main aspects. First are bonfire-like meditation rings. So when you want to save, heal, or use your skill points, you need to find such a place. This feature does not harm your enjoyment in any way really, but also it does not enhance it either. It does not make the game any harder, as there are so many of these meditation rings that they easily could have been replaced with regular checkpoints. Also, they serve as your respawn points, obviously, but what this does is creates a problem. If you ran past the ring because you didn't have skill points to use or didn't need healing, you won't be respawned at it if you die later. Instead, you will be respawned on the one that you used last, which can be miles away from where you died. It would not be an issue if activating rings was a matter of pressing a single button. Sadly, to activate ring, you need to watch a small cutscene of Cal meditating on it, even if you didn't need to use any of its functionality. I just can't see what this feature adds to the game that regular checkpoints could not. The second hardcore mechanic is closely related to the previous one, as each time when you rested the meditation ring to heal yourself, all enemies respawn, something that is again blatantly taken from the Dark Souls. But Dark Souls is a magical world with immortal beings and a lot of lore. If I am not mistaken, it even has in-game explanations to both why enemies can respawn and even why you as a player respawn too. Star Wars is not a magical world like that. Stormtroopers are not mysterious beings that should be able to respawn. And I am not against respawning enemies, but it could have been simply done smarter. Maybe enemies could appear while you are far away, in another location or on another planet. There are situations like this already in the game. Like this entrance to the tomb, which has a couple of wild creatures roaming around. But when you get out of the tomb later, there are Imperial forces waiting on you. This feels totally reasonable, as they do not simply appear in front of you. They came here while you were in a tomb, But situations when you kill a group of enemies, then rest near them, and those enemies that you killed a minute ago now stand in front of you again, they do not feel reasonable at all. But instead, they are stupid and add literally nothing to the game. They again don't make the game any harder. Almost any enemy encounter can be skipped by just running past it. They won't even try to follow you. And it definitely does not make this game more fun, immersive or interesting. The only reason I can find for this feature is that developers wanted to copy what was working for another game, without even thinking if it would fit their world or gameplay. The third and final hardcore part of the game is that you kind of, maybe, lose some experience on your death. In Souls games, on death, you lose all the currency that you need to level up and buy things, everything at once. This makes dying very meaningful and important to the gameplay. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a much more casual game though. Some players can be very upset if they lose that much progress. But you want to steal this feature no matter what, for some reason. So what do? You make it meaningless instead. Rather than losing everything, you only lose your current progress to the next skill point, and that is it. Not the skill point itself, only the progression. Most of the time, this would be equivalent to losing around 1 to 5 minutes of progress, rarely up to 15. And to get this experience back, you need to hit an enemy that killed you once. For a single successful hit, you will get all experience back and even heal to full HP. Summarizing this feature, when you die, you lose close to no progress that you can easily then return. Why even bother and implement this feature in the first place? And yes, this does not really hinder your experience or make the game any worse. It barely even affects how you play the game at all. But this is the point. It is just a useless mechanic that is there just because guess what? Another popular title has it. In itself, it adds nothing original or interesting to the gameplay. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a truly fantastic game that I totally can recommend, and it definitely benefited from the fact that it was inspired by the Souls-like genre. I can't see it with any other combat system. But this does not mean that they should have blindly copied everything else too. You don't just duplicate something because it is popular. You get inspired by things and create something your own out of that idea. Trying to copy the hardcore mechanics of Dark Souls in a more casual title was just a plain stupid idea, and it definitely made the game less original. And even though parts such as hardcore features and exploration were quite meaningless, they did not make the game actively worse. What I am trying to say is that Fallen Order is a successful game not because of all the features that they have stolen, but thanks to the original parts that clicked with the players. And I truly hope that developers would change their approach to the game design in the next installment that was announced earlier this year. I truly believe that if they really tried to create an original Star Wars game instead of trying to copy something more successful, it could be one of the best Star Wars games ever.
Execution.